entry. 27th, Tuesday, the 27th of May, 2025. A sociopathic mother-in-law next door. So, we talked about the first, let's just say, 18 months of the husk and stepdad living in the lodge, and how things were generally, any negative was balanced by positive. The four of us as a dynamic socially kind of coped, had some good times, enjoyed stepdad's company, and generally speaking it's a bit of a honeymoon period. But the way the story goes, the honeymoon period probably would have lasted a lot longer if the story didn't go the way it's about to go. So anyway, during this first 18 months, another thing that's worth noting is that the husk could quite easily go into one of our mega huffs. At times when you want to be unified as a family, like occasions, when you go out as a family and you go out in unity, she kind of on occasion used to go into a mega huff and kind of divide the family. One example of this would actually happen 2 years in a row. The first 2 New Years, or was it just the first one? I don't think it was the first 2. Anyway, so New Year's Eve is our beacon in my anniversary of meeting, not getting married, but of actually meeting the divine intervention. And it's obviously an important anniversary for us, New Year's Eve. And so it's just a very brief example, but we would invite the husk and stepdad to go down the pub for a few drinks on New Year's Eve and take it from there. And what an absolute a huff she was in. Nobody could work out why, but she's got a strop on. We're walking down to the pub and she's miles ahead with my daughter, and that's the kind of, like, she's in a huff, so she steals the attention of what would have only been an 11-year-old girl, 12-year-old girl. And then we get to the pub, and I kid you not, the pub was, at this point there was only a couple of people in, it's just a small space. And I kid you not, we sat down, she sat at the opposite end corner of the room with our daughter, and I don't know, there must have been some games in the corner, like dominoes or something like that, pub games, and started playing. And me and the beacon are just sitting there with stepdad, and stepdad's oblivious, he doesn't care. The beacon is so worn down, 40 odd years of this behaviour. It's just whatever, she's going through one of her periods. And when I'm sitting there thinking, what on earth is going on here? We've come down the pub to start the celebrations of not really New Year, but of our anniversary. And we're completely divided in the pub. And that's what I mean by dividing the family. As long as she's getting attention. I don't know why she did it. Even now, knowing what I know now, I still don't know why she did it. I think she just doesn't like it when she's not centre of attention. And while the family's divided, thank you, in the pub, then she's the focus of attention. She's getting all of the young girls' attention, my daughter, and she's ultimately getting our attention because we're thinking about her and her stupid little strop. And I think that's all that is. But you can't live like that. You can't live constantly on eggshells, constantly wondering which version is going to turn up. She likes to be in control. She likes to be the centre of attention, and she doesn't like it when somebody else takes control or centre stage, even though it's not. Nobody's trying to take control just because it's our anniversary. We just invited them out for a drink. Yeah. And that is common. That behaviour, maybe not as extremely obvious as that, but the idea that when you go out in unity, the face is tripping. If it's not her that's the centre and in control. So as things went on, there was obviously still these little signs to the point where I would get frustrated and you just can't speak to her, you can't give her feedback on her strange behaviours and her huffs because she's a child inside that brain, behind the husk that she's created for the outside world to see. Behind that husk is a child, and you can't speak to a child, you can't give them criticism, feedback. You can't give them feedback because their brains aren't developed enough to be able to take constructive criticism for what it is. And you try dealing with a very, very young teenager, that's the sort of behaviour that you get. Huffy, can't take any feedback. And sometimes don't even know why they're in a huff. That's another thing with teenagers. They go, I've seen this from my daughter. She's just feeling down. She comes across as being quiet, solemn. You ask her what's wrong and she gets frustrated. I don't know what's wrong with us. I just don't feel right. And that's just totally normal for a young teenager, child. The emotions are starting to, they're starting to experience all these different emotions, and they kind of put them into context or make sense of them in their head. So it just comes out as confusion. Same as the husk. You ask her why you're in a huff, she won't be able to tell you, which is probably why I can't understand it. She won't be able to tell you why she's in a huff, because she doesn't know. And that's why it doesn't make sense. Unless it's subconsciously at times when she doesn't feel like she's in control. Kids like being in control as well. They like being bossy. Little things, don't they? So yeah, behind that husk is a broken little child that's never grown up, never matured, never developed healthy emotions and understanding of those emotions and empathy for others, because she doesn't understand her own emotions. How on earth would you expect her to understand someone else's? You're absolutely banging your head against a brick wall, trying to get somebody who is so held back in their development 70 years later to still think like a child. You're banging your head against a brick wall. If you think they're going to develop empathy anytime soon, it can't be done. It's never too late. But it's going to take a lot of work, self-work. You've got to recognise there's a problem first. But anyway, I digress. So, first 18 months, generally speaking, positives balanced out the negatives, probably tipped the scale towards positive. I really enjoyed having stepdad as a companion, somebody to take down the pub, and he got to know a few of the locals, regulars, and you know, as he always did in his own strange way, he made himself become known to the locals, so much so that they actually thought he was my dad, because we were kind of joined at the hip. They just assumed it was my dad. So then there was, I'm trying to think, some of the nasty, cruel things the host would say to the beacon when she's had one too many drinks. I'm trying to think of some examples. It's generally speaking just, like low-level criticism, passive aggressiveness, complimenting something about the beacon which is gone, like a hairstyle. Oh, I used to love you in that hairstyle. It's just a way of criticising our current hairstyle. That's a common known thing with people with narcissistic traits. They criticise through compliments. And the beacon has got a photograph. The husk has got a photograph of the beacon and I in our lodge when the beacon was pregnant. And personally, it's probably my favourite ever photograph of me and the beacon, because the beacon is pregnant, which is obviously fantastic memories. She's got a glow about her. She looks really healthy and happy, as do I. It's before I started going grey, so I look like a young man. I decided to grow a beard. That was the first time I'd ever attempted or even thought about growing a beard. So I would have been 33 probably, there or thereabouts. So I decided to grow a beard, and the idea of the beard was, whenever the beacon sees a photograph, she knows when she's pregnant, because she's clearly pregnant. So she knows it's a photograph from that time. I had nothing like that. I wanted a reminder of when the beacon was pregnant, a reminder in my sort of appearance, so I could just time stamp it, I guess. So that's why I grew the beard. So every time I saw a photograph of me with a beard, I knew what the timestamp was, and it would just bring back good memories. So anyway, this photograph in the Husk's Lodge, the beacon's got short hair, and she looks stunning, but she always looks stunning. And it's for different reasons that she looks different. In my view, she looks even more beacon-like because she's pregnant. And anyway, every single time the husk makes reference to that photograph on our shelf, she always loads it with, "I loved your hair like that." That's the only thing she says about that photograph. And what does that do to the beacon? It just tells her, message received. You don't like me long hair, and blah blah blah. You know, you've got nothing good to say about us. And these are common patterns of behaviour. Just wears the beacon down. So, anyway, back to the story timeline. After about 18 months, well, after about a year to 18 months, stepdad started getting a pain in his throat, and he's struggling to swallow food and stuff like that. So, after much putting off, he went to the doctors, and he was given the news that he was diagnosed with throat cancer. And obviously this is not how we wanted the plan to go. Obviously there was problems with the husk, but not on a scale of what there is now. So I've always got to remind myself that at the time everything was fine. It was working out, the living together was working out. So this wasn't part of the master plan. He was given a diagnosis of throat cancer and given 6 months to live, which obviously was pretty hard to take. And so this next period is the period from the diagnosis to the passing over. So he was still socialising. He was still coming down to the pub for a pint. He was still coming across the bar for a laugh. He was clearly, as the weeks and months went on, he was getting a bit weaker. But I also think that the diagnosis didn't do him any favours, because the psychological trauma of being told such devastating news can put the body into kind of shutdown, where you're kind of accepting your fate. And I believe that played a big part in his demise. But anyway, he was battling on in terms of still going out for a pint, still socialising. That was all his life was. He had sold his allotment because he couldn't sort of keep it on anymore. And I had built him a little vegetable plot at the bottom of the garden, and he likes to go out for a pint and tend to his veg. That's as complicated as he was as a man. Obviously he was no angel, but he didn't want for much. So as time went on, he got a bit more tired, and two of their friends used to visit. Two of their friends, the Husks and stepdad's friends from back in the town where they used to live, they used to visit every now and again. They loved coming up, spend some time with them, and spend some time in the lodge. And there was even on occasions they slept at our house. They slept over so that they could have a drink and socialise and didn't have to get home. That's again how accommodating we are. And at the time these were good friends. As stepdad deteriorated, these two friends continued to visit frequently, and they obviously realised what was happening, and they wanted to obviously be there, as support and help him enjoy his sort of last days, so to speak. I mean, he outlived the 6 months. He didn't have any of the poisonous chemicals treatment, which he was advised wouldn't necessarily do much for him anyway, because he was so frail. So these two friends, they would come up, and we would say, as stepdad was getting weaker, Beacon and I would say to the husk, look, why don't you just get them to come up for an evening again, and they can stop over and they can spend more time with stepdad. He's happy for them to be there. He doesn't need to be drinking, and we don't need to be having a party. He can just be there in his seat until he's tired and he wants to go to bed, and then we'll have a couple of drinks as a nightcap and call it a night. It was a way of trying to get him to still see these friends on a level which he was accustomed to, on a proper social level, not just a brief visit on a Saturday afternoon, but spend the night, spend some time with them, and blah blah blah. Plus, it was helping the Beacon and I deal with it. Having two people around who have empathy for your situation and are there as emotional support was helping us. So, obviously the Beacon wouldn't think of this, or she wouldn't think of anything. But anyway, when we said, no, you should invite them up, no. That was her response. Impulse, no, it's not right. How is it not right? Well, it's not right because he's not well. Oh, well, he's not getting any better though, is he? So what, you're just going to never ever 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 have any fun with him anymore? It really, really frustrated us. It was just point blank no refusal, and I thought that was cruel. I thought at the end of the day, she was making decisions on his behalf without consulting him. He never had any problem with them coming up for an hour or so on a Saturday. Why the hell would he have a problem with them coming up for 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday evening until he's ready to go to bed? Why would he have a problem with that? He wouldn't. But no, just totally cut off. No. I couldn't work it out at the time. It's just really, really, really cruel. So he never got, obviously they would visit, but he never got any sort of real escape from just sitting in that lodge every day. And this period was from the diagnosis, I'm just trying to remember, it was probably a year, maybe slightly more. But like I say, I believe a lot of his demise was through the trauma of being told, he got 6 months to live. His deterioration, he wasn't eating. He didn't want to eat, he had lost interest in eating. In other words, he had given up. You could tell from what he was saying, he had given up. There was once I caught him, who I'd managed to get him across to our house for dinner one evening, and we're giving him a little bowl of soup as a starter, and nobody was paying attention, and I can't remember the exact circumstances, but no one was paying attention. But I looked away for a few moments, and I looked back, and he had completely wolfed it. He had completely eaten that soup as if he was a homeless person who hadn't eaten for 3 months. I kid you not. I know what I witnessed. I know I saw a full bowl and then an empty bowl very, very quickly. And I told the beacon about this, and I was like, something's going on here. And he's given up, but he doesn't really want to. It's like he's putting on a front or something. He doesn't want help of the husk. He just wants to give up. Doesn't want any of her help. But when he was in a different environment, and it was somebody else giving him the food, he wolfed it down. And I was saying to the beacon after this event, I said, something's not right there. He's exaggerating his problem. I can't get it down. I can't eat. He got that down absolutely no problem. And he just didn't want to try anything that the husk suggested. But in a different, like I say, in a different environment, it was a completely different person. And his weakness and his frailty was basically from not eating. That's what it was from. That's what he died of. Ultimately, he died of starvation. He turned into a famine-stricken teenager. Looked exactly like, the Ethiopians back in the 80s when it was all over the television about the famine. So that was strange. It was just, the whole thing was just heartbreaking. And then I'm trying to think, just obviously it just got weaker and weaker, and then one point we went on our summer holiday for a week just in this country, and we came back, and in that week, I think it was a week, yes it was, in that week I couldn't believe how much he had deteriorated in terms of his weight. It was literally just dropping off him. So you knew he couldn't move. It wasn't going to be long before he couldn't move. Didn't have any strength, and he just turned into a total skeleton. And then, and the beacon, during this period, the beacon was nothing but, a shining light for the husk and stepdad. She was there, the practical one. I'm the daddy now, playing a role and taking control. The beacon she can't make decisions, important ones, and she just flaps in an emergency. When I say emergency, I mean when there's like a really, really important decision to make, and if there is a bit of urgency, she totally flaps. And the beacon is there to save the day. So the beacon was absolutely instrumental to making sure stepdad was comfortable in his last few weeks and days, which obviously meant a lot to the beacon because it was his wishes that he would die at home, and obviously the beacon had made that promise to look after him when she moved him in. So for all this was difficult, there was a uncanny sense of like fate playing out, where everything, all of your dominoes are lined up. You've made all of your choices and your commitments and your promises, and then it's actually quite nice when it all falls into place, even if the circumstances are hard to bear. Hope that makes sense. So during his last days, he was bedridden, couldn't go to the toilet, constantly needed tending to. The beacon was a big help to the husk. Husk was just coping, I would say, no more than that. And then he got so bad he was just kind of calling out to be finished. Just wanted to die. And then a health professional visited and made him comfortable, and then that was it. That's how it works generally. Once you're being made comfortable, it's for your onward transition, and that happened. His last breath was on the 6th of August 2023. Not even 2 years ago. And it was on a, if I remember rightly, Sunday night, fairly late, 10 o'clock, something like that, that the beacon got called over, and the husk was flapping and the beacon had to take control. And I mean, she was really flapping, the beacon. The husk was really flapping. Did I say that? The husk was really flapping, and the beacon had everything under control. Who to ring, what to do, what to say. And the husk's behaviour was strange. There was on one occasion, at one point during this, he was in the bedroom, and the beacon went in, came out and said, yeah, he's no longer with us. And so she went to phone whoever it is you ring to deal with this sort of stuff. And the husk stopped her, like hung up the phone, and the beacon was, well, what are you doing? And we still can't work out why she was behaving the way she was at the time. And she seemed to, I don't know, not want the beacon to deal with it. And I can't recall at the time what the beacon's rationale was in terms of working out what the hell her mother was up to when we spoke about it afterwards. But now, I think, and this is just totally my opinion based on what I now know, I think she wanted to make sure. I think the husk didn't want anybody called. She wanted to make sure. And that was some deep, dark thoughts. But this is my diary, and I'll say what I want to. Say what's on my mind. So anyway, eventually, whoever it is comes, the police come and guard the door. Make sure you don't tamper with the evidence. They're basically there to make sure it's not a crime scene, or in case it is. So it's pretty disturbing the way you're treated when something like this happens. So anyway, this was all dealt with, and we moved on. I don't want to dwell on that story for too long. There's nothing else that you need to know about that night, other than I sat by stepdad's bed for 45 minutes, speaking to him after he had gone, tears rolling down my eyes, and telling him how much I loved him, and laughing and having a bit of a joke as well. You know, what do you say to somebody? Final words. I mean, I know you had gone at this point, but it's still effectively what you do when you're having your final words. So anyway, as time moved on, the Beacon was basically in control of everything, and the funeral came and went, and I find funerals quite hypocritical at the best of times. I know there should be a time to remember the good things about the person, but they are a bit hypocritical, and people turn up just for their own virtue signalling, and that's probably the most hypocritical thing about funerals, is people turn up, put an act on, and I found his family very, very strange. Stepdad's family, his son in particular, like, still never even exchanged a word with him. In the 33 years I've known his dad, visited him in the lodge and never spoke to me. Went to his own dad's funeral, never spoke to me. I'm the guy who basically took away all of his money problems, gave him a home, supported him, and made him happy, and gave him his dying wish of ending his days in his own bed, in his own house, the Beacon, everything she'd done. Where was his son? Where were they? I haven't even got the decency to put some effort in at his funeral. So anyway, so the funeral passes, and then we get home. So there's me, the Beacon, my daughter, Roadkill's husband, and the Husk. We return home after the funeral, at which point probably the behaviour to note from the Husk at the funeral was just no emotions. No emotions at all. Not unless all eyes are on it, like at the service, and the tissue comes out. And this might sound harsh, but knowing what I know, they can't cry. These people cannot cry. And when you're a fully functioning human with a high level of emotional intelligence, your mirror neurons are working perfectly. You know when someone's crying because you feel it. And I can tell you without any doubt in my mind, that's not crying. So anyway, pretty much emotionless. at the whole event, and then we get home, 6 of us, and the plan was just to have a few drinks in the bar. And I'd like to talk about him. Personally, I'd like to talk about him. That's something else that doesn't happen at funerals. Nobody talks about the person. Everyone's just in their own world, denying reality. So, anyway, that was my plan. Go to the bar for a few drinks, but I kid you not, the moment we all arrived back at the house, as soon as we got in the house, then came the crocodile tears. Along came the crocodile tears, and Roadkill and the Beacon escorted her back to her lair, the dragon's lair. Escorted her back there, and never saw them again that night. And me and Roadkill's husband just made some small talk until it wasn't too rude to say I'm going to bed. And she just didn't want the attention to be, this is my analysis of that situation, she didn't want the attention to be on a dead husband. She wanted the attention to be on her. And again, that might sound harsh, but this is how these people think. And in the moment, you're fooled. You think it's real. It's not.